Welcome to Gaia Dairy Farming Insights, the infotainment podcast for the Dairy Farming Network. Join our community that takes you on a journey through the vastness of milk production, your source of knowledge and inspiration in every episode.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Gaia Dairy Farming Insights podcast. My name is Maren Luth. I'll be guiding you through today's podcast, and I'm pleased to welcome a guest from the scientific community today, Dr. Ute Müller from the University of Bonn. We will look at how scientific research can actually be turned into real products, and we'll highlight this with smart farming innovations, specifically introducing the Gaia AutoDry product, which focuses on the dry-off period. Welcome, Dr. Ute. Can you tell us a little about yourself and your activities at the University of Bonn?
Thank you very much, Maren. Yes, first of all, for the invitation to this podcast, and then also the opportunity to introduce myself. I learned agriculture, I'm a qualified farmer, and then I studied agricultural science in Bonn and also completed my doctorate. And before my current role as an animal scientist, I was a milking consultant for a Dutch company for 2 years and then provided milking advice in southern Germany. And I must say, through my training on a dairy farm and this milking consultation, I actually developed my passion for milking. Now, for 25 years, I've been back at the university as an academic or senior advisor at the Institute for Animal Sciences at the University of Bonn, and I am truly a passionate animal scientist there in research and teaching with many wonderful project opportunities.
That already sounds like a very exciting career path, and we certainly have an absolute expert here in this conversation. You'll have many cases to report from your long-standing practical experience, but also from science that deal with udder health. An important topic on dairy farms, of course. And as everyone in practice knows, that the dry period in particular is a very critical time for udder health. And that mistakes can quickly have negative effects like infections or similar. So please tell us a bit about the topic. What are the biggest challenges for farmers today when drying off their dairy cows?
Yes, that's a very important question, and I must now state it's more relevant than ever. So it's about the time, the final days before the actual stopping of milking. That's the process to get there. The dry-off procedure is thus at the end of lactation and is actually a central component of herd management. I do notice, however, that it's often underestimated and not given enough thought. And due to the high production of many cows, it's more important than ever because drying off is a crucial phase for the udder for regeneration. Also, in this time, the calf experiences significant body growth, and that means overall for cow and calf preparation for the calving, and especially then for the cow, the next lactation period. Traditionally, milking stopped from one day to the next and still does. So milked once more in the morning, then perhaps dried off with a teat sealant, and then no longer milked in the evening for 6 to 8 weeks. Depending on the production level, this then creates significant pressure in the udder because the mammary gland doesn't adapt that quickly, especially when the milk yield, the daily milk yield, is still very high. We're talking about more than 15 or 20 kilograms per day. This can lead to discomfort, but what's much riskier is that it can lead to new infections. To avoid that situation, many farmers at the start of the dry period routinely applied antibiotic dry cow therapy, even to animals that were initially completely healthy. This practice is now no longer permitted. However, it's hard to get out of people's minds because you have to know that in the 70s to 90s, which wasn't that long ago, that generation is still active today. Antibiotic dry cow treatments were actually recommended by advisory services and considered safe. But as we all know, with increasing awareness of antibiotic resistance in human medicine, but also in veterinary medicine, this practice was questioned, and now there are legal regulations and requirements for it. Reducing antibiotics is a crucial, central priority for all of us.
This is a very current topic, so your research group must have already addressed this topic probably several years ago and considered what alternatives might be possible.
Yes, so ideas were just in the air and events then aligned with that. We eventually wondered if there isn't a smarter, gentler method to reduce the cow's performance before drying off to a level where this infection risk is significantly lower, so that we no longer have this reason to dry off antibiotically. And can we perhaps help ourselves through milking by automatically drying off the cow through milking? That means day by day not milking the udder completely empty, but always leaving a little more milk in it. And this question was actually the starting point for the later AutoDry project and other projects. So this was the question we asked ourselves.
So, just to really take a close look again, what would actually be the most natural process to systematically bring down milk production and then enter this dry period phase? So, from your research group's perspective, this question was quite pressing. And how did that then actually develop into a concrete project?
This whole thing began with this discussion.
We had discussed the physiology of the mammary gland and also this natural approach that the young animal, the calf in this case, gradually starts eating roughage and then drinks less and less, some earlier, others later, and thus the mammary gland also adapts its production. This is the case with every mammal when demand is reduced. And at the same time, then, the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture published a call for proposals to reduce antibiotic use in livestock farming under its innovation funding program. We believed this was our opportunity to genuinely and scientifically put this idea to the test. Therefore, we reached out to GEA because indeed we understood that we would require an industrial partner who possessed the necessary interest and who could and would truly develop this appropriate technology. We actually found that at GEA. I was very, very grateful for that. And together we then developed, submitted, and got approval for the project proposal, automatic reduction of milk yield before drying off to minimize antibiotic use for the project back then.
That was essentially the kickoff for this collaborative research initiative. At GEA, animal health and professional good milking are naturally important topics that influence all projects and product developments. Therefore, it's very valuable, of course, to work firsthand, always closely with science and the scientific community. Our collaboration is actually being put into practice at the Frankenforst experimental farm, right?
That's right. Yes, we were part of the team right from the start. A doctoral student was also hired for the project, which is the part that's important to us, that someone can develop and earn their doctorate through it. The team included Professor Büscher from our side, and then truly very competent, great people from GEA, especially at the top, who immediately understood it, Dr. Biete Maaßen-Franke, but also the female programmer. I was really quite impressed by how you collaborated with us right from the very start. And then we initially defined the requirements, drafting a sort of requirements document together. What must the software be able to do? And concerning the gradual reduction in milk volume during each milking process and how much of that is truly automatically implementable. Once the concept was established, GEA then developed the first software version, installed it on our experimental farm's computer, and then, yes, we began to test it. The experimental farm is named Campus Frankenforst. It is located near Königswinter and belongs to the University of Bonn. Among other things, we have a fully functional dairy farm where we can then actually test such technologies under practical conditions.
How long a test designed for, and how does that actually work in practice for you on a test farm?
So the entire project ran for 3.5 years. That's a normal duration, usually between 3 and 4 years. Once the software was installed, the process, which spanned about 2 years, involved repeatedly checking when cows were to be dried off, and we deliberately selected healthy uddered cows and always divided them into 2 groups. The one group of cows that would continue to be milked normally with the standard automatic takeoff, this is set for us at Frankenforst at 300 grams of milk per minute. This is what we call a common threshold. And the other group, with the help of this software, approximately 10 days before the actual dry off, we milked 5% less milk each day compared to the milk yield of the day before. This means the milking clusters were taken off earlier each day, allowing the udder to gradually adjust itself, not so drastically from one day to the next. And there's also an intermediate step where milking is done only once a day, but that's a much gentler method. But what was crucial, the software was programmed to detach by milk yield. Otherwise, every milking system in the world is based on milk flow.
So this shutdown process was really very systematically simulated, as closely modeled on reality as possible. When did you really get your first results? How was the progress? Were the findings quite clear and you knew right away you were on the right path?
Yes. So it was super exciting because we were truly in an absolute pioneer phase. So when I think about it now, I get a bit of goosebumps. So what was truly surprising at first, I simply have to say at this point, is that the software worked flawlessly from the start. So I was really positively surprised by that. And that, of course, also helped us a lot for the further experiment. And we could then truly see bit by bit how effortlessly it was to implement this milking procedure with the experimental cows. And then always the milk yield in comparison, because we had grouped them so they had similar milk yield, the control and test cows. Then we considered, how do we know when the cows have reached their peak production? The cows were leaving the milking parlor with slightly fuller udders. Milk was spraying at us, which is completely contrary to how normal milking is understood. Then for drying off, you milk them out once and the udder is empty. But to know their true performance, we practically added another day's milking. And we were very surprised how the mammary gland truly adapts in these 10 days to this reduced demand. We could even show through an ingredient in the milk, an acute phase protein, that even this natural regression for regeneration, called involution, had already begun in this phase. That which is normally triggered, as it were, only after the dry areas.
So, only positive effects that this procedure has actually brought about.
Yes, and most importantly, what many initially thought, this principle, if udders aren't milked dry, they'd be sick. And we could simply show that if they are healthy udders with no bacteria present, there are no negative consequences for udder health. We had no mastitis cases, no positive bacteriological findings, cell count did not change. So there are actually no indications of physiologically no reason that a healthy udder should become sick due to more milk. And we were able to demonstrate that clearly.
That's really exciting. Yes, that really clears up long-held mindsets that were common in the market or simply on the farms and opens up new directions, right? And what was the initial feedback from farmers, from veterinarians who saw this and were involved?
The whole thing only came about, after Gea and I repeated the experiment again, right? Based on just one such experiment, even if it was complex, there's a lot behind it. And so it became clear it works. And now, importantly, also for the farms, Gea then undertook further development steps. And from these, they created a prototype, which was then integrated into existing milking systems. That's how the Gea AutoDry product was born.
Yes, it was then also presented for the first time at Metten in 2022 and then even won the gold medal, the innovation gold medal at the EuroTier. So it truly is the collaborative work and especially your research efforts that have been recognized at the very highest level. Quite an honor, wouldn't you say?
That's true, but what I find even more impactful are the reactions I hear. And I don't have many opportunities, but when I do hear them, I'm simply delighted by the feedback I receive. Some farmers have reported that it has fundamentally changed their preparations for the dry period. Many people are initially skeptical because, as we described earlier, the milking process is so unfamiliar that cows are no longer milked completely dry, and habits are truly difficult to change. But after these 10 days, I've even heard of a farm that extended it to 14 days, simply to be absolutely sure, with higher producing cows, that milk production significantly decreases for drying off. Udder health is not affected, and they can thus confidently forego antibiotic dry cow therapy or are no longer in a predicament. And those who are applying it are truly convinced it's a new way of understanding milking, that we simply, in this particular case, go with the natural rhythm and just make use of it.
Yes, it's very exciting how a project from a theoretical question that's already practically relevant in operations now concretely translates into technology or software and is actually put to use. How would you, from your perspective, looking ahead, see the future for these technologies?
I look very positively into the future. I know that processes don't move as quickly as I would wish them to, but I clearly see there's potential and development in it. At the moment, it can only be used in conventional milking systems, but as far as I'm informed, it will now also be adapted for automatic systems, and I believe there's a really specific demand for it, as I've heard. And as we continue to work on these considerations, at which points in lactation can incomplete milking also lead to relief? Now, in my view, more relief for the milk's metabolism, because as we know, in many phases, high milk yield can cause metabolic problems. So we've already conducted one trial directly after calving, as is well known in this phase. Cows often fall into an energy deficit or a stressful energy deficit. They then expend more energy than they are able to take in through their feed, and this can subsequently lead to significant metabolic stress. And in such cases, a controlled reduction in milk production can effectively help to better balance this particular phase, which means alleviating the metabolic burden on the animal. Another approach you see came up during a conference that with this we can also alleviate periods of intense heat for some cows so that they experience considerably less heat stress because we reduce their overall production beforehand and they then yield less milk. The higher a cow's milk production, the more susceptible it is to heat stress. This means that by adjusting milk production and the energy consumption associated with it, cows could become more resilient to rising temperatures. And this resilience, as we all know, will become increasingly relevant for the future. The results are truly very promising, especially since the software, even when addressing these specific challenges, the pilot software that we currently possess operates reliably. I very much hope that further ideas can develop into products from this. We observe in all projects for healthy udders that udder health remains stable. We also observe in these two subsequent projects that milk production does not subsequently decrease, but that they return to their original milk yield level. There are various ways to calculate this. And also initial results that it has measurable benefits for the metabolism and at the same time no impairment of animal welfare, which we were just able to show through current studies. Everything is still in its early stages, but they show that there's potential in the combination of animal science and digital technology towards smart farming, allowing us to react quickly for each cow. And when I look into the future, I am truly convinced smart technologies will sustainably change the dairy industry. They help farmers to operate with greater efficiency, to manage their larger livestock herds, even if I then have to focus more closely on each individual animal, but which I consider to be very important. And with this in mind, they then also use the data to be able to make appropriate decisions. Beyond efficiency, for me, it has a particularly important impact on the welfare of the individual animal, because that is important. The moment we talk about animal welfare, we have to look at the individual animal. And if we can use data and software to improve the lives of individual animals, of cows as a whole, to reduce stress, diseases, and unnecessary treatments, especially antibiotic ones, then that's a real step towards sustainable agriculture. And that's exactly our goal: healthy cows.
You've definitely given a good summary. And it's very interesting to hear that many further research projects are already underway to advance this very topic of smart farming and to improve animal health and sustainability. So, this is incredibly exciting. I think there's a really positive outlook here, and things are progressing on both levels, both in research and with GEA AutoDry. As you pointed out earlier, it's also inspiring to hear how scientific research results in real solutions for improving animal health and naturally benefits farmers and animals. It was a pleasure to once again dive into this specific project, but also into your general research topics. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I would also like to sincerely thank you for the opportunity to speak about these wonderful project results, my further ideas, and especially now consciously for the excellent collaboration with GEA. This conversation was also a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our listeners, and until the next episode of our Dairy Farming Insights podcast.
Follow us on our social media platforms to stay updated and subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. If you have questions, suggestions, or even ideas for future topics, feel free to reach out. Join us soon for another exciting episode as we continue to explore the world of farming and the people behind it. Until then, keep farming and growing.